Hey, what's up, Camp Believers? Man, we took a short break. Family and I were traveling back from Oregon, back down to the hot and sunny and 115 fucking degree heat of Tucson, Arizona. But we are back, and we're also back with another episode. I am so excited about this. This man is someone that I've followed for quite some time. I want to say since the start of my IG career. He was someone that I looked at not only just because he was local to Arizona, but also because some of the really beautiful things that he was doing. So I mentioned this in the episode, but I felt like I've had a front row seat to development and what the process looks like. And I had just posted this on, the new IG Threads app or the anti-Twitter. But I love people's process, man. It's truly a beautiful thing when you can get to a point where you can understand that if you're taking small measurable steps towards an overall, let's look past the goal, an overall way of living, it's a really beautiful thing. And so on today's episode, we invited Anthony Thosh Collins. Him and his wife, Chelsea, just promoted, authored, and are now doing some really cool wellness retreats. The 7 Circles Indigenous Teachings for Living Well. I love this episode so much because we dove into not only Thosh's sobriety journey and why he got to that point, but what I thought was really interesting, and you're going to see this in subsequent episodes, is that some of these really high-level, high-performing athlete entrepreneurs are taking a page from what we know about how the mind works. And that is, my friends, manifestation. It sounds super cliche, right? It sounds like I'm going to read you your horoscope, but let's take a look at not only just the science of what happens, but also let's take a look at how we cue our environment for success. We dove into Thosh's new book. We dove into some of the things that really spoke to me. I'm still reading through it right now, so I'm still in that process, and I would urge you to do the same. And obviously we'll mention this in all the show notes and anything that you're going to be looking at. But I felt like we solved some really cool social issues. I kind of challenged Thosh in some really hard ways of how do we navigate health? How do we navigate working together? Not only amongst indigenous communities, but also just as a whole, as a population of diverse people. Like, how do we do that? And he answered a lot of these questions in such beautiful ways. We talked about his role as a father. We talked about his role as someone who is not only connecting with his sacred space, but also with ceremony and what that means. And I'm personally excited to listen to this again. I've already listened to it twice. This will be the 3rd time after this gets launched. Thosh, if you listen to this, bro, you continue to be an inspiration in my life, and I'm sure that you continue to be a massive inspiration, not only just in the indigenous communities, but also communities at large. Bro, you're a lifesaver, man. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And for all my camp believers and high performers out there, I can't wait for you to listen. I hope you enjoy. Let's get it. Anthony Thosh Collins is on my podcast. Holy shit. Yo, welcome to the pod, dude.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Like I was saying, I'm honored that, you appreciate what I do, and I'm happy to be on here, and I love what you do as well. And so I'm always looking to connect with like-minded people. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Oh, it's honestly, Thosh, it's been a really cool, and I was just saying this a little bit off air. It's been like when I see really solid, authentic people thriving, it's a really good reminder of what happens when you get to tap into what makes individuals really great. And so to have you on, man, is such a pleasure. I was connected with your account through a mutual friend that you and I have, Martin. Shout out to him. He's another
Yeah.
person I got to have on. He's thriving right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Heck yeah.
But I stumbled across your account because I think you and him were hanging out, one time. I think it might have been like almost like 2013, like really nuts.
Yeah.
So to see your evolution, Thosh, I think is just so cool. So before, obviously, I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about all the really beautiful things that you and Chelsea are doing. Really give you your flowers to that end. but I want to hit you because I've been seeing like little sound bites of you doing your media tours and other things like that, jumping on other podcasts. So I want to hit you with a question that none of them have hit you with. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So you and I discussed Coachella a little bit. All right,
Yeah.
over stories.
Yeah.
um, I need to know, what were your thoughts? Actually, did you catch any of the live streams of the past 2 weeks of Coachella this time around?
No, I just seen some of the highlights on their social media,
Yeah,
but I didn't really watch anything yet. I wanted to. I wanted to catch up because I was supposed to go, but we had some book stuff came up that we had to sell our wristbands.
I
But
saw that.
yeah,
How much of that did it like kill you to not be there?
like if it was me back when I was younger and like going out regularly, I would have been crushed. But
Yeah,
you know how it is when you get older and you're just more accepting. You're, okay, all right, we can't go. We can't
yeah,
go. I'm not going to see, um, Rosalia or Frank Ocean or whatever, Bad Bunny, and we had
yeah.
some friends playing. But if it was me like 10 years ago, I'd been like, oh,
No.
crushed. But I'm like, okay, maybe we'll get to it sometime.
Yeah. I felt the same way. I mean, I think you and I kind of discussed that over stories where it's like,
Yeah,
you get to a point where you feel like you're too old. Like I would like to tell myself that I'm not, but then when things come up inevitably from a family perspective or professionally,
yeah,
you're like, all right, well, I got stuff to do, So I think,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's an aligned way to look at it. Um,
yeah.
all right, so let's tap into earlier, Thosh.
Yeah. Well,
I
let
need,
me say something real quick first
yeah,
before we
go for
move
it.
on to that part. But like, yeah, the tickets I had sold them to my friend's niece,
So it worked
and
out.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So we didn't completely lose the tickets. Like, was able to sell them and sold them to my friend's niece who was trying to go, and the girl's 19, and I told her, I said, when I went the first time I went to Coachella, you weren't even born yet. So in regards
Oh,
to what you're talking about, getting older, that was
yeah,
one of those things. I'm like, dang, you weren't
damn it.
even born yet when I went to the first Coachella in like 99, back when it used to just be a rave. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, we've had so many, I've had so many, crazy experiences in my 20s and early 30s that I've done enough. And so at 40, 41 now, I'm like, I've done all that. It's not
I'm
going to
good.
kill me if I don't see a show.
So
Yeah.
how many times have you been? Because I did like almost like a 5 year stint.
Yeah.
Damn man, like almost 10 years ago. Pretty
Yeah.
much like stopped going when my daughter Rory was in the mix. But how many times
Yeah.
have you been?
I just went three times. I was like
Okay,
99, 2000, and like 2002. Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So top shows. What were the top ones for you?
Bjork. Bjork live.
Oh,
Yeah.
that must have been dope.
Yeah.
All right,
Super dope.
give me a second and a third. What do you got?
Um, I don't know if you know who Square Pusher was. He was
No,
like electronic music producer rave back then. He
I love
played,
it.
just blew me away. Yeah. There was so
I'm gonna
many of
have.
them. Like it was like a lot of it's a blur. I just remember being in
Yeah,
like the b-boy circles,
I love
and
it.
just probably in another world, a blur.
I know. Gosh. Yeah, I mean I was gonna ask you about that. I had watched the live streams and I was like, there wasn't really a whole lot of hip hop compared to like past years, which was surprising. Like
Yeah.
Metro Boomin was there. Like obviously he had a ton of people with him, but that part was surprising to me. And obviously, I mean, it's the first time we're having an actual conversation, but noting all of the hip hop that you put into your videos and your content, I'm like, Thosh and I align. We listen to the same
Yeah.
music.
Yeah. Heck yeah. That's dope.
I love it, man. Well, I told you I would kick it off with a question that you hadn't gotten yet, so I'm glad we got to kick the music a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, Thosh, like I was saying, like we got connected, if you will, socially through Martin, which back in 2013, which was right around, I don't know when you had started your account, but it's been really cool to see visually your evolution and your maturation, and then obviously you and Chelsea, get together, and then you guys have this beautiful family, and then things just start hitting it. So it's like there's so many places to start, but I think for you, I mean, authentically, like, where do you start when people are like, "Hey, Thosh, like, tell me your story, man."
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you kind of know me from back then too, and I really look at this past 10 years as probably my most exponential growth in this short time that I've been on this earth, and so much was learned through my 30s and getting into my 40s. I turned 41 in a couple of days, and I I I'm looking ahead, for the future. Seems like it has so much. There's so much to look
Yeah.
forward to. I have so much in my mind. There's a vision that I have for myself, and I'm living it. The vision I had for myself back when I was like late 20s, early 30s,
Yeah.
getting on my sobriety journey, the vision I
Yeah.
have for myself, I'm living it now. And so that's one thing that I'm really grateful for. And I'm looking forward now as we are, Chelsea and I have two daughters, and we're in the process of building our house, and we're visualizing what is that like. We're putting into action everything that we write about in our book, everything we've been teaching and training about in our indigenous wellness workshops and native communities.
Mm-hmm.
We're I mean, we're living it now, but to be able to put it intentionally into building of a home and what that consists of, and visualizing, health aging in a healthy way. That's where I'm at right now, is just looking towards that. But I always have a vision, and I always encourage everyone as well to always have a vision, and
Yeah.
every day is about getting one step closer to that vision. And
Yeah.
so, to take it back, like what you had asked, um, for those that are not familiar with where I come from, but I was born and raised on the Salt River Reservation. Our original name is the Anakamir O'atham, Salt River people, and
Mm-hmm.
our reservation is located just outside of what is now known as Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was raised there, and I moved away at 19 to go to college in San Francisco, and later on moved down to Los Angeles, and did freelance photography. And but being raised in my community, I was fortunate to be raised within the cultural values of our
Yeah.
people, and so I've always carried that with me, and that's who I am. There's a certain values that we live by, but also growing up during the res on the res during that time, as much beauty as I experienced with our cultural values and being raised in community, I also experienced a lot of grief and trauma in the
Yeah.
community as a result of loss of land, or loss of
Mm-hmm.
culture, or loss of lifestyle, and the diseases that we see that are prevalent, not just amongst our people, but really all human beings.
Yeah.
Diseases such as addiction, depression, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, they're all new diseases that in people in pre-industrial era, pre-colonial era, had virtually no experience with.
Yeah.
Growing up on the res, it's really prevalent because just how much our people have been impacted negatively
Mm-hmm.
by the colonial process. So that's something I'd seen growing up. And when I started getting into my 20s, I started to see that there was this indigenous wellness movement, which
Mm-hmm.
was a movement that was intentionally helping to heal. There was an intentional movement to heal our people from the persisting impacts of historic trauma. And so I got exposed to that as a youth, and kind of would pop into some of the gatherings, and then left me for a while when I moved to the city, and I experienced the stress going from the reservation to the
Yeah.
city was like a huge culture shock. I didn't realize, what I was doing, and nobody really prepared me for it. I guess my family and the community were like, all right, he wants to go do photography in the big city. All right. And,
Yeah.
people
Good
supported
luck.
me. Yes, people
Yeah.
supported me. They were very supportive, but when I got there, it was the culture clash, and that was the first time I'd experienced the use of alcohol and substances, and
Mm-hmm.
so I went on this about 8, 9, 10 year journey of experimenting, and thinking I was being social with these things, but I always knew these weren't congruent with the cultural values I was raised with. This is
Yeah.
not congruent with the teachings that the healers and the medicine people I was raised around had taught me to stay away from. And then I always knew in my head, oh, I'm going to get away from this at some point. And then as time went on, I got more involved with the native wellness movement, and it helped me kind of get out of that phase there. And I would say, yeah, about 10 years ago, I've started to dedicate my life to contributing to the indigenous wellness movement.
Hmm.
And Chelsea and I met in about 2013, which is 10 years ago, which is what you had said that you had
Yeah,
started kind of peeking into what I was doing at that time. And together we developed an indigenous wellness initiative called the Well for Culture.
I love
And
it.
yes, the whole initiative was to help our people to bridge the gaps that we were seeing between fitness, eating well, bridge that between our original cultural modalities of foodways, movement, and sort
Hmm.
of making this hybrid approach of what we learned from these modern modalities and on what we learned from oral tradition from our cultural
Yeah,
leaders at our communities. So we kind of put that together. And at the time, nobody was doing that really in Native country on social media. So
yeah, no,
today it's prevalent, and I like to think that we had a part in that, but others were also arriving at that conclusion at that
yeah,
time too, when people were starting to do things. So I was also sitting on the board for the Native Wellness Institute, and so I'd had some experience with traveling Native country and visiting other Indigenous communities and learning about the similarities between our worldviews and cultural practices, and being able to shadow people who were facilitating Indigenous wellness circles, practices, and things like that. And so that's what Well for Culture was sort of born out of that. And,
yeah,
going forward, we developed a model called the Seven Circles, and we created that in about 2018. And the Seven Circles is foodways, sleep, movement, ceremony, sacred space, connection to land, and community.
hmm,
And we created that because traveling around Native country, we found ourselves talking about very specific life ways, and we sort of started to conclude that the the pathways to healing from the historic trauma and grief lies
hmm,
within those original life ways of our ancestors. So we said, let's make it simple and comprehensive, and let's put them and we put everything in a circle. As Native people, we understand
yeah,
things cyclical, right,
hmm,
as opposed to pillars, or bullet points, because
yeah,
typically what that does is it fosters a very compartmentalized thought process. So when
100%.
we
Yeah,
have these circles, yeah, are connected. The circles are life ways, and the circles, if you move one, you're going to shake the whole system.
yeah, yeah,
And it's just like us physiologically. All the different systems we're made up of is cyclical. It's all interconnected. So those seven circles are life ways, and they affect your spiritual, your physical, your mental, and emotional states of being. So,
hmm,
and those are all interconnected as well. So that's what our healing and wellness model is about. And then we wrote the book on it, which the book is a way to appropriately share that with all people, of the world. So it's sort of our contribution is to young Native people, to the collective movement of healing, and people to get in touch once again with what it means to be human, and
hmm,
to be understand their role within this interconnected web of life. And so that's sort of the book is our attempt to try to share another perspective, a very bare bones template that people
yeah.
could follow to reconnect in that way.
Man, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I had some absolute guilt because I sent you the story and I was like, "Yo, I picked up the book, excited to read." And at the time, I was like, "All right, I think there's 250 pages. I can knock this out before we get to the interview. Like, I'll be good." So I started it this last week, and I was like, "Crap, I don't know if I can do this. I got to run through this." But what was really nice, and it's an approach that I am just completely aligned with. But I might butcher what the theme was, but the message that I got was, just like wellness or just like the things that are inside of this book, you're going to come to it at the pace that is good for you, right? You're going to
Yeah,
come to it whenever you come to it. And I think it was a really nice look, Thosh, into not only empathy for where the person is at, but really speaking to their humanity. And
yeah,
I really, really loved that aspect. And I'm wondering, just from a cultural perspective, you had said inside of the indigenous culture, indigenous wellness, like there is this movement that you and Chelsea likely have a heavy hand in. Um, you're saying that it's a movement right now. And I think my big question here, just from personal experience inside of the Latino culture, when we talk about generational trauma, if we look at, our elders, if you will, they're not comfortable talking about it. And
Yeah.
it's just something that they know, but it's not something that outwardly they're going to talk about. And I wonder for you, are people in the community talking about this, or is it something that you and Chelsea and other leaders are leading? Like, how how does that go about?
Yeah, absolutely. To give context, and typically a lot of the native people in the United States and native people in Canada are sort of in the same, they also sort of, we all subscribe to these certain, the same narratives when it comes to healing and wellness. And there shouldn't be any barriers between us and indigenous people to the South. But unfortunately there is, and that's
Mm-hmm.
shows how, powerful borderlines are in politics, policy, language,
Yeah.
sometimes it seems like we have more relationships built between us here and indigenous people, like in Hawaii, or Aboriginal people in Australia, or Maori
Mm-hmm.
people in New Zealand, than we
Yeah.
do with indigenous people, in Mexico and the
Yeah.
South.
Yeah.
Even though we're all connected and we're all the same people.
Yeah.
So, the narrative around addressing historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, collective cultural trauma, unresolved grief is
Yeah.
pretty prominent amongst both people, First Nations people in Canada, and all of us here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And just maybe 10 years ago, it was not. And it has really increased over time, especially with the certain events that may have happened in dominant society, such as the revealing of unmarked graves of
Yeah.
Indigenous children who were sent to boarding schools throughout the United States and Canada. And that was something that has been uncovered for the past 2 years. And it really opened the eyes to a certain faction within the United States and Canada about the history. So, things like that happening. Also, the movement to create awareness about missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's a whole phenomenon where Indigenous women and girls are at higher risk of sexual assault or
Mm-hmm.
violence than their non native counterparts. And that has been something that has come to the forefront in the recent years, especially. There's even some federal policy happening since this new administration. So that sort of put more eyes on that narrative. So, to answer your
Yeah.
question, it's a lot more. These topics are more discussed, and people are more open to them in these recent years. But it took a long time.
Yeah.
It took a long time because, just like what you had said in Latino culture, with amongst some elders within
Mm-hmm.
within those communities, we had the same thing, and there probably still is a faction of elders in our communities who would rather not talk about some of these topics because some of them had directly experienced it, or some of them have
Yeah.
been conditioned to become
100%.
enculturated into American culture, for sure.
Thosh, I really value what you and Chelsea are doing because, and I've said this on other guest podcasts, and it's my stuff, and it's something that I have to continue to work through. But I really value the type of people like yourselves who are able to be present in the pain enough to talk about it. Because when I do think about the injustice, when I do think about all of the things that you had talked about, I can sit with the pain, but it's really hard for me to articulate like how I'm feeling because it's really just grief and anger. So like
Yeah.
I wonder for you, and I don't know if this is something that you've just acquired over time, but and I don't want you to speak for Chelsea, but if we're speaking to you both as a unit, if you will, like how do you take care of yourselves enough to be like, okay, well, this is our thought process around it because, and I don't know from a book perspective, if you and Chelsea both contributed, and Chelsea did most of the writing because it had said like you're the photographer, videographer, and Chelsea writes. But I really loved the introduction and the things that were said because I was like, this is such a beautiful way to articulate pain, but also the fucking facts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad that you recognize that, and that certainly has something that we have learned to articulate and regulate our emotion over time is Native people who are constantly faced with some of the grief and trauma,
Yeah.
by watching family members, loved ones, and even ourselves, but still needing to be able to move forward, and having grit and
Yeah.
resilience is a part of our culture, and it's our
Yes.
cultural values. It's something we've learned that in order for us to thrive within this society, this complicated world, that we must be able to have a balance and harmony of being okay to feel our feelings,
Yeah.
being okay to feel pain, being okay to feel hurt, but also being able to muster up enough strength to keep a vision of how do I want to feel? How do I want to act? How do I want to think? And
Hmm.
what are the steps that I need to take to get there? So we have these two, you know, these two things here, these two circles that are
Yeah.
overlapping, and they're always going to overlap. We're always going to be healing from something. There's no finish line to healing. We're
There's
always
not.
moving forward, right? We're
I wish
always
there was.
moving. I know, right? We wish there
Yeah.
was. There's so many things that the construct of this something complete and finished is so prevalent, but at the same time there's this infinite you know uh, uh, um, aspect of living and understanding that things are always changing and evolving, and that's the way of the world, and we are always going to experience some sort of hurt and pain, and we have to be okay with that. And what I always say, it's all about having the
Yeah.
tools to deal with the stress, and having the tools to maintain our grounded, to keeping ourselves spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally grounded, so we can act a certain way, so we can think a certain way and feel a certain way. So it's just something that certainly happens over time, and we learn to regulate our emotions, and it's something I'm still learning to do myself. I'm learning to process. I'm learning to sit with things. If something makes me feel a certain way, or something is making me think a certain way, only in this past couple of years have I learned to realize, before I make a decision and respond to something, I need to sit with it and process. And it could be days, could be hours, it could
Yeah.
be weeks. You have to give yourself time to process. And I understand that in a certain emotional state, that's not the time that we respond or make decisions. And
Yeah.
so I think that it's critical to have the tools, to be able to recognize when you need to employ that process. For me, like things such as meditation helps.
Yeah.
Various types of ceremony throughout the day. That's why in our circle, ceremony is
Yeah.
our wellness model. Ceremony is a circle there, because the whole purpose of that circle is it's about giving yourself tools to be emotionally, mentally, physically, emotionally,
Yeah.
regulated, and to employ some forms of meditation, or um, sitting in silence, some sort of practice that can help relieve stress and get us out of this emotional reactive spot, and more up here in the executive functioning area of the
Yeah.
brain, to be able to make good decisions.
I think this is a beautiful transition because my next question, Thosh, was literally going to be like, all right, well, let's tap into the seven circles. Like, what are your go-tos right now in your season of life? Can you expand on ceremony a bit more? I mean, what does that mean for you and for our listeners out there who are brand new to this model, if you will? Like, how can they cultivate that?
Yeah. So ceremony is what I always say. Ceremony is the gesture, a series of gestures and actions that we do to recognize or to acknowledge our spiritual reverence for all things in our world.
Hmm.
So it's just a way to acknowledge these things here. And ceremony can be done amongst just yourself. It can be done with friends or family, and it can be done on a larger scale in a community setting.
Yeah.
Ceremony can happen, in your dorm, your office. It could happen, outside somewhere on the land. Ceremony could be 30 seconds. Ceremony could be several days. And it all depends on, what's a part of your practices, or what you are, willing to create, or what you need to feel connected, to feel spiritually grounded, and to feel, what I say is, to feel and recognize your interconnectedness to all living things.
Hmm.
And that, to me, that's simply what spirituality is. It's it's a word for describing, this mystery of what's making everything move. The Even at a cellular level, from here all the way to space, there's
Yeah.
something that's making everything move in the way that it is. And spirituality, to me, is really just acknowledging that. That's simply what it is.
Yeah.
Ceremony is the action of acknowledging these things
Yeah.
and putting it out there into the universe, that here I am as a human being. I'm a five-fingered human being here, and I'm recognizing my role, my interconnected role in this beautiful web of life. And I do
Yeah.
that. It could be sitting in silence in the morning. So what I always share with people is, ceremony could be, something as simple as I'll share an example like what I do. It could also be ritualistic. I think ritualistic is interconnected with ceremony, but it's slightly different. Chelsea has a great way of also articulating that. But I would say something that's sort of, ritualistic. It's, the big thing that stands out about it to me is that it's consistency. It's something you're doing on a
Yeah.
regular basis. Like, for instance, in the morning, I put my 5-year-old to bed, and then I wake her up to get her ready for school. And so one of the things that we do first thing in the morning, when she's starting to stir, I'll help wake her up, and I'll sit her up and, kind of talk with her, ask what she dreamt about, and then I'll sit her in my lap, and then I'll just hug her, and I just
Yeah.
feel her little heart, feel her energy, and we'll breathe together. And then I ask her to go over and open the window and greet the sun. Thosh, the
Mm.
morning sunlight is healing for us. So she'll go over and she'll open up the window, and then she might describe something she's seeing outside. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of like, it's ceremonial in the sense, because the purpose of that is of course building connection between, father and daughter.
Hmm.
And it's releases also, like the science of it too, the oxytocin release as well, the
Yeah.
feelings of happiness and warm and kindness and love is really helpful to start our day, helps reduce the cortisol, reduce overall stress and anxiety that we might have about the day. And then we acknowledge the sunlight, and teaching her that the elements on the land, what we witness are what's important to us.
Yeah.
So as Native people, every time we do a giving of thanks, which is where Thanksgiving comes from, a giving of thanks is acknowledging all of the things in this world that play a role in making this world function the way that it does. So for me, the sunlight, Tashtonore, that's what we always call it in our language here, or the Mother Earth, the Jivat Gacham, the Nada, fire, air, Havard, Shudak, water. We acknowledge all these things because without these, all life would cease to exist.
Yeah.
What all life would cease to exist, the microorganisms, the animals on the land, the plants on the land, this beautiful web of life here that we are part of. And to me, ceremony sometimes is just acknowledging those in your own
Yeah.
way, because it
Yeah.
helps the person who's in ceremony. It helps the various neural networks to connect, to make the connection between their existence, their health and well-being, and their role in the land, and how the health of them reflects the health of the land and all the other living organisms on that. And I think that's, to me, that's the basics. That's the basic, um, bare essentials of doing a ceremony and recognizing that you are a spiritual being. So getting back to mine and Al's little, morning ritual, I would call it. That's something that we do. And before she gets up, I get up, and now the sun comes up earlier, right? So we're moving into
Yeah.
spring, you know. The sun gets up earlier, so that's perfect because a lot of times in the winter when I get up, I'm sort of sitting in darkness, you know. But
Same.
now,
It sucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So now is a good time. Like when I get up at like 5 or 5:30, you know, that morning
Same.
light is right. It's
It's
a good time.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful. So I'll sit right here and I open these windows up, and my coffee is steeping, and I'll sit up and I'll meditate. I do transcendental meditation, where I have a mantra that's repeated in my head, and I clear all the thoughts. And sometimes it's like I go in a black hole, and
Yeah.
I do it for 20 minutes, and sometimes it feels like 5 minutes, and I know when to open up. I look, oh, 2 more minutes, and we finish. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm over 1 minute, and now I'm ready to start the day. I'm ready to have the coffee, and or the days that I don't do the meditation, it's really sitting here in silence and letting the morning light come into my eyes and acknowledging that, because that's supposed to set you on the day too. And in my
Yeah.
head, I try to envision how the day's going to go and how
Yeah.
I'll respond to, because everything is about responding. Like you notice that you're always responding
100%.
to something, to stimulus, not just to emails or text, but your body's responding to stimulus, how you feel, how you think about things. So getting the sunlight in the morning also helps us to, get ready for the day, and you're visualizing how the day is going to go. How am I going to think, feel, and act today? That's what I
Yeah.
also think about. And this leads up to that vision that I have for myself 10, 20,
Yeah.
30 years
Did
down the
you
line.
did you visualize yourself doing what you're doing now?
In which aspects?
I
Like
mean,
doing that.
yeah, cuz like I
Yeah.
like to think back cuz I have plenty of journals, and I stumbled across one the other day when I was having a tough moment, back from one from like 2019, when I was just really starting what I was doing. And I looked, and some of the things that I was writing about, some of the gratitudes that I had, I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, like
You're doing it.
I couldn't I'm doing it, right? Like I
Yeah.
could not have visualized the details, but I knew it was something special. But damn, like I didn't know it was gonna be
Yeah.
like this. Like, Thosh, do you have those moments
Yeah.
where you're like,
Yeah.
holy shit,
I'm doing it. Yeah.
I'm doing it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I said to you at the top of this podcast. I was saying that, what I'm doing now is a manifestation of what I was visualizing like 10 years ago as a
Yeah.
bachelor dude, just putting away alcohol, substances. And I did that because I always knew when I was, in that party lifestyle, I always knew that this is not how I was raised,
Yeah.
and this is not something I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I need to put it away sometime, but I'm having too much fun.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I write about
Too
that,
much
right?
stimulus.
I'm too much stimulus. It's too much fun. I
Yeah.
like the attention. I write about that in the book too. And so finally I was able to put that away, because I knew, also just because, the way I was raised, or what I seen in my community, I seen a lot of
Hmm.
great healthy families, and was raised by one myself. And I always knew, I says, I want to be married someday, and I want to have children, and I want to be participating in the community, going to community functions, going to community gatherings and ceremonies like my dad took us. I want to be
Yeah.
out hunting, in the mountains, doing stuff in the mountains with my family that my dad did with us. So, I visualized that, a long time ago. And I have those moments like what you say. I'm like, man, I'm living it. I'm doing
Yeah.
that. And
I'm doing this shit.
I'm doing this, and I haven't, had a 9 to 5 ever. And I've been, grinding away as a entrepreneur, as a young guy
Yeah.
doing photography. Now we're doing indigenous wellness consulting, and, we're authors now. And, yeah, and, so, the whole, financial success component of it too is something that I visualized myself. I said, I know if I keep chipping away at these things, I will always work for myself, and I will
Yeah.
always enjoy, what I'm doing, and it will be lucrative one day. And here,
Yeah.
here we are. We're living that aspect of it too. So absolutely, like, to answer your question, having a vision is really important. A mission as well. The mission is what you're going to do. The vision is how you're doing it. And
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
every damn day has to be about living that. You can't just, everything has to be done with intention. Like, I'm hardly ever sitting here just wondering about and doing nothing. We're
Yeah.
always doing something. And I encourage everyone to keep chipping away at their wellness journey. And if they haven't found their purpose, it'll emerge, right?
Hmm.
It'll emerge
If you look hard enough, you'll find
yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely. And you do things to, raise your consciousness. The path starts to clear out before you, for sure.
Hmm. I love that. Just on the topic, Dosh, of like ceremony, I came across two pieces of content. One was really, really beautiful. The other one was hilarious. Uh, so Chelsea had something where like the caption was like quality time, and it was her just getting in some boxing work with you. And I was like, wow, that is so awesome to see. The other one that I thought of was actually one that you did around the holidays. You're sitting there and you're like, this is how I like to celebrate traditions or whatever,
Yeah.
holidays. You're sitting there in the dopest Christmas sweater I've seen to date, eating a piece of cake, and like other times, and then you're just like playing in the snow.
Yeah.
Bro,
Yeah.
you had me on that one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, because, like oftentimes people, I only, how it is with your social media life and reels, you're only showing like the best of it.
Yeah.
And I'm only showing, all the best looking great whole food meals that I make from something we
Yeah.
harvested, we hunted or foraged or
All
planted.
the, yeah.
I'm always showing that, but what I forget to show is like the pizza eating. I forget to show, my
Yeah.
gummies that I like to eat, my energy drinks,
Yeah.
cheesecake. Like, I have all these things that I still have. I allow myself to have. So as long as I'm living healthy life ways, you know, for
Yeah.
most of the time, then I can metabolically, I say, afford to
Yeah.
have a couple
Yeah.
slices of pizza. But yeah, that post was, this is me in the holidays, I'm eating a cake.
Yeah.
But also me. And then it switches over to, and I'm in like just some shorts running in the snow and I'm like
Right in
falling
the
in the
snow,
snow.
just playing.
Is in North Dakota, it's like 18 degrees out and it's
I
just
was gonna
like
say, like, where
blizzard.
was that? It looked cold as hell, bro.
Yeah, Chelsea's family. She's from North Dakota originally, and that was her mom's house in Fargo. And yeah, it's the coldest place in the country, and it wasn't even the coldest that it's been there, But it was like
Yeah.
18 degrees, and I was just getting my
You
my
just
cold exposure. Yeah, that
I
was
think
awesome.
you had some sound bites with ACDC or something like that too, which just like
Yeah,
made it great. Um I love that, dude. I
yeah,
I wanna I wanna go over to the one of the other circles because I mean I see this a lot being in a wellness creator in the wellness community. As a dietitian, I didn't think that this was possible, and maybe I should have just like understood how colonization works. Um, but there's been a lot of people who have colonized indigenous eating, right? I would
yeah.
love to get your thoughts because if we look at someone who is actually doing it correctly, so you have harvesting land, right? I saw you
Mhm.
literally just like do the manliest shit that I've seen is like you kill the animal, you bring it in, you're cutting it the other day, and you're just like, hey, this is what we do. That's what I view as the process. When you look at some of these other creators, I mean, what conversations are you having in your home amongst your community members who actually know what it looks like?
Mhm.
Just when it comes to that, I have a laugh, I cuss, like I do all those things. Like,
Yeah.
what's your response?
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I try not to be, too judgmental about things, but certainly on social media, we do see a lot of practices that were originally indigenous foodways, and we see, many people, using them today that, they're not acknowledging, that they're doing it on the land of other people who are no longer have access to that, and they're
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
privilege of being able to just go and hunt or go over and forage certain places or fish certain places that the original inhabitants no longer have access to those. And so,
Mm-hmm.
we certainly see that. We certainly see the whitewashing of certain indigenous foods. I think you see that most notably with indigenous foods from Mexico. I think that you've seen a lot
Yeah.
of sort of a colonizing of those those foods, and sort of the erasure of indigenous people that had brought corn, or tortillas, maize,
Yeah.
to America, who had, the people who originally hunted the elk, the mule deer, the people who originally fished for the salmon, and the original foragers of this land here. I think that for sure we certainly see an erasure, of that, and
Yeah.
I think that we just have to continue to just gently educate people for sure about these foodways, and getting them to be able to advocate for indigenous people to reconnect to those foodways as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always funny when I see it because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So it's
Yeah,
hard to look at, and I think what was really beautiful is there's moments in the book, again, I'm still going through it right now, but I
yeah,
feel like, at least for me, the best types of literary works are the types that make you think. They make you put the book down and they make you like, okay, I gotta spend a week with this. And I came across one, like it's a section like where are you thriving now? And it makes an
yeah,
emphasis on the seven circles, and it provides a little bit of guidance of how are you moving? Do you enjoy this type of movement? Like it really sort
yeah,
of takes that, Thosh, where does that come from? Because again, what I see is a big dose of compassion and empathy, and then also
yeah,
some direction, which is very
yeah,
much in line with like how I operate too. So like,
yeah.
you know, where does that come from for you? For you?
That's good. I'm glad that you recognize that, and I think that from what we've seen, a lot of readers that resonated with them. Just that approach, where I guess we don't directly say it in there, but we think it's important
Yeah.
to meet people where they're at, and this also kind of goes
Yes.
back. This speaks to something else that you were mentioning too. Something else that resonated with you previously in our discussion here. It speaks to that, but from our understanding as indigenous community health educators, from our experience traveling in native country and trying to bring, you know, healing strategies from our ancestral ways to our people and helping them reconnect, what we've discovered is you have to meet people where they are. And even though a certain food practice or certain worldview comes from a certain people, it doesn't necessarily mean that those living today that are descended from those maintain that, because there's been again a severance. Excuse me. There's been a severing of that tie through the
Hmm.
colonial process, the acculturation. So
Yeah.
what we've discovered is we have to be very gentle, and we always like to start, where are you thriving? What are your strengths? I
Yeah.
think that's
Lead with
so
strengths.
important. Yes, like as anyone who's in any sort of leadership role, you're going to get a better response. You're going to get more people to buy in and be a part of something if you can see their strengths and you can help them flourish in that strengths. If you can capitalize on their strengths, then you're going
Yeah.
to see an increased performance, whether it be in the workspace, some sort of like movement happening, a social movement in the community.
Hmm.
That's a whole cultural value of ours. Leaders, they really knew how to help people see their own strengths, build
Yeah.
that, and move together, stronger. And so that's what we wanted to do in the book. And the process is first ask people. This speaks to what you'd recognized about some circles. They're going to be bigger.
Yeah.
Ask people, so where are you currently thriving right now amongst these seven circles? And
Hmm.
wherever you are thriving, that circle is going to be bigger. Say someone exercises a lot, they never
Yeah.
miss gym time, their circle's big. Maybe they realize they got to get good sleep, that's a good sized circle. But maybe
Yeah.
they're not getting out on the land enough, so that
Hmm.
circle's smaller. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not connecting with community and family, and that circle's small too. And those things are critical for our overall health and well-being. Like all of the seven circles are
Yeah.
equally critical. One's not more important than the other. There's not this hierarchical, um, thing or process there, that they're all
Yeah.
interconnected and they're equally important. But some of them can be bigger, you
Yeah.
know. And so maybe their ceremony circle is kind of small. Maybe they're not really doing anything ceremonially or ritualistic to kind of help them slow down from this
Yeah.
fast paced life. You know what I mean? So that's what that is. It's meeting people where they're at, asking them, where are you thriving? That's good. Keep that. The same intention and energy you put into that. Let's put that into these areas that you know you need work. So that's the next
Yeah.
step, is looking at the circles and being honest with yourself and recognizing what circles need work. And maybe
Yeah.
it's somebody asleep. Maybe their sleep hygiene is not as great. Maybe they're staying up late, scrolling, getting lots of blue light. And maybe they're
Yeah.
waking up. They get up because of the alarm, but maybe they're not recovered. So
Yeah.
maybe, that's something that they can start to work on. And it's simple as starting, it's just putting steps in place, it's putting strategies in place to slowly get them to build a habit. So maybe
Yeah.
somebody sets a goal for themselves where they say, okay, on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, no social media after 9 p.m., no
Hmm.
devices after 9 p.m. I might read something in a book, or, it's meditation time before sleep to help reduce stress so we can reduce mind chatter so we can get into a good sleep state to increase sleep
Yeah.
hygiene. Maybe that's what it is. And as time goes on and that becomes a habit, we have to learn. Habits have to be practiced. It's a new
Yeah.
neural pathway, takes time in order to mature, and pretty
Yeah.
soon it's habit. So I think that that's a lot of what living a wellful life, living a life with intention and purpose is breaking down those old behavior patterns that we may have learned and creating new ones, making that the norm. So
Yeah.
that's what that whole process is about.
I love that too because I think it speaks towards like a a really beautiful depiction of like lack of rigidity. Because
Yeah.
you had said something earlier, and I want you to solve all the world's problems with this answer, Thosh. But um, you had said like that there are consequences to like borders and boundaries, right? And as you were talking about there, I do because I'm from New Mexico, considered third generation, if you will, and as my family and I continue to trace back like where we've come from,
Yeah.
we are indigenous to Central Mexico, and
Yeah.
we found ourselves in present day New Mexico, and until 1912, until it became a state, and then we are all of a sudden Americans, right?
Yeah.
I do see a massive, and I don't know how you feel. Like I'm sure you've been to different reservations in New Mexico, but I know just from a visual standpoint, having grown up there and then being removed and then going back, that there is a real separation between quote unquote New Mexicans and Latinos, and then some of the other indigenous and reservations. So you had said that there is a separation. I mean, how do we overcome that? Like, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts? Because I
How do
feel
we
like wellness.
reconcile?
Yeah. Okay. Please. Yeah. Go.
Yeah. I think that, first and foremost, people have to be in a place. This is with everything. What we're seeing in society today is a real lack of staying curious and staying flexible in someone's worldview or their stances. What we're
Yeah.
seeing in society is this very like everything is presented in a binary matter. You're either this side or that side.
Yeah.
You're either plant based or you're carnivore. You're either red
Yeah.
or you're blue. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're either conspiracy theorist or not. Like
Yeah. There's no
everything.
duality in your thought process.
Yes. Right now in society is there's a severe lacking of understanding. Everything needs to be looked at with nuance. If
Hmm.
you look at a mountain, if you drive around it 360, that
Yeah.
mountain looks changes. It's another
Yep.
perspective. It does not ever look the exact same from two different angles. And that's how we must look at the world, and we must look at all societal topics, is understanding that it's going to be different from every perspective. And it's true. No matter which way you're looking at it, it's true that it looks that way. And there's so
Yeah.
many topics like that. There's so much nuance, and we must understand the circumstances, you know, at when to employ certain strategies or have certain ideas or worldviews. I think people need to. I think that we have to foster that, especially in the young people, because it's. I think
Hmm.
everybody in the whole generation, they're set in their ways.
Yeah.
We have to
Can't teach a
foster.
dog new tricks. Like I used
Yeah,
to hear that all the time. I'm like, oh my
yeah,
God, that's such an annoying saying. And now being 37, I'm like, damn, you're right.
yeah,
Shit.
yeah. People are really rigid and set in their ways, and we have to teach the youth to be fluid in their understanding of society and their understanding of where certain cultures and certain groups and certain demographics are coming from. So I
Hmm.
think that, to reconcile the disconnection between indigenous people from south of the border living here,
Hmm.
on indigenous people's lands and what is now known as United States. I think that both sides have to have the understanding of compassion and empathy,
Yeah.
and being okay with being taught something new and accepting that
Hmm.
maybe something you were a worldview you were taught by your parents and grandparents is not actually true. um, and so I think that that's so important. I'm constantly teaching that to people on my community or my family and my circles, and say, well, those are just other indigenous people. They just
Hmm.
speak Spanish, you speak English. What
Yeah.
difference is it? They have been
Hmm.
displaced for social political reasons. They're coming here,
Yep.
for a better life, and that's just the way it is. They're other indigenous people, and that's how we should treat them. We should view them as that. We shouldn't
Yeah.
view them as, oh, you're a Mexican, oh, you're different than me. That's
Yep.
the colonial mindset. That's
Yeah.
the colonial mindset. Indigeneity is not just the color of our skin or what tribe we're enrolled in or what state or country that we are a citizen. Indigeneity is about where we come from, the actual place on the land that we come from, and our connection to it, and the values we carry in heart and mind. To me,
Yeah.
that's really what indigeneity is about. And I think
Love
it's
that.
so critical for all indigenous people, regardless of their citizenship, to stand in solidarity, because
100%.
we when we do that, we build ourselves up, we build one another up, and we make ourselves more resilient to the colonial process, to policies that are inherently racist or sexist, and that are will ultimately have an impact on the health and well-being of our people. Political
Hmm.
policy is powerful.
It
you
is.
know it's powerful, and we must, as indigenous people, recognize that our solidarity is critical.
Hmm. Man, there's so much more, Thosh, that I would love to dive into, but in the in the realm of respecting your time, um, I do want to say that reconciliation, I think, is definitely needed. I think that we have a lot more in common than we give ourselves credit, because as I'm looking at a lot of the teachings inside of this book from a wellness
Yeah.
perspective, from a community perspective, we all want our people to be good,
Yep.
safe,
Yep.
fed,
Yep.
treated well.
Right.
There's a lot of things in here inside of the synchronicity of how the seven circles play together that I mean, I've had plenty of conversations amongst different cultures, ethnicities. Like, I think we're all kind of one where it's like, hey, I want to make sure that I have food. I want to make sure I'm safe.
Yeah.
I want to make sure my people are safe.
Hmm.
I just think that there's a lot of similarities. So,
Yeah.
I hope, I'm sure you're seeing that now as you're doing some of these different workshops and whatnot. I hope you're getting the flowers that you all deserve, man. It's
Yeah.
really cool to see the evolution, bro.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Um, I we're trying to really, you know, embellish in all the great insight, that we are receiving, and trying to just feel it and remember it, and just really honor the feeling of being able to make an impact on, people's life. To me, like I said, in the beginning, there's no greater honor than to be able to have a role in somebody's journey to feel well. And just the feedback that we are receiving from the book, and everywhere we travel, when we do a book event or a workshop and a book signing, there's Native people who come up and they're just emotional because
Yeah.
it resonated with them that much. And so for me, it's just powerful. Like, wow, like I just
Yeah.
feel really proud of that we were able to do that. But, that wasn't just us. That way has been paved by,
Sure. Yeah.
native leaders in our communities that raised us. In spirit, I believe our families are behind us. And that's how the
Yeah.
book came
Yeah.
about. Like a lot of things got moved around in order for us to be able to write the book with a large publisher like HarperCollins. And so
Yeah.
we feel that from a spiritual sense, there was people, in that way that were helping us to get this done, because there was a lot of things that don't normally happen for first time authors, we are told, by a literary agent. So we felt
Yeah.
really, you know, um, that was just amazing to kind of know that. So, you know, yeah. So thanks again. I'm certainly glad that you're reading it and that things are resonating, and I hope that it'll continue to resonate in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, I'll use your guys' words against you, right? There's no such thing as coincidences, only synchronicities,
Yeah,
baby.
that's right. That's right,
I
man.
love it. I
Yeah,
love it, man.
yeah.
Well, Thosh, I never try to pre-program out any questions, but I do to go ahead and close us off here. I do like to ask two questions of all of my guests.
Hmm.
I want to be respectful of your time again, man. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. So the first question is, obviously, this is the Can't Believe I Made It podcast. So, have you made it? And if not, or if you have, what does making it look like for you in your season of life right now?
Yeah, I feel like we're making it.
Yeah,
We're living the life that we've intended, that we've set for ourselves, Chelsea and I, when we started Well for Culture. It's turning into more, than what we had really expected. And
yeah,
so what that means for us is continuing to enjoy, day by day, all of the in betweens, because we have these glorious moments, right? When you're living
yeah,
life, you have these glorious moments where
yeah,
things are great and everybody's recognizing you for your great work. And then you come back down, and then you're at home, and you're dealing with day-to-day stuff. You're dealing with logistics. You're dealing with all
yeah,
these things that sometimes like to feel like they're throwing a stick in your plans, or a wrench in the
yeah,
wheel.
yeah.
What I've learned is that we have to just continue to accept those. And I'm always telling myself that, accept the in-betweens, and try to appreciate for what they are, especially with our children, because they're growing fast. So,
I know.
you know,
Jeez.
yes. So for us, that's what it looks like. Making it is just really being in those moments, and
Hmm.
simultaneously appreciating what's happening here and now, like this moment we have here, but also being grateful for what we had experienced before this, and looking forward to what's going to happen next. So that's
Yeah,
that's what that looks like for me.
I love that. All right, brother. Last question for you. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you once again.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, we have the Seven Circles book that is out right now. That you guys are continuing to do some really cool work. Um, how can people support you? And also, bro, when you come into Tucson, like do a
Yeah.
workshop in Tucson, bro. I'm there.
Yeah. A few people from Tucson hit us up, and we've done some stuff at U of A with the Native Studies Department.
Uh-huh.
I think they did reach out, and I think that somehow, those plans fell through the cracks. But we certainly want to get back down to Tucson. We love Tucson. We love the community of people there. Tucson has such great culture there, so
Yeah.
we're definitely trying to plan like a book event and workshop down there.
Yeah.
So we'll be in touch with you on that. Tomorrow, and here in Phoenix, we're doing a workshop on the Seven
I saw
Circles
that.
interactive, yeah, and then followed by a book signing event. So we'll likely try to plan something in Tucson, for the near future, because, like I said, we love Tucson. So yeah, the book, how people can support is, yeah, go out and buy the book. It's published in HarperCollins. They're the second largest publisher in the world. There you go. We got to sign it too. I got to sign
Yeah.
it,
No, I love that.
personalize it.
Yeah.
And so, people can buy the book wherever, books are sold, but we encourage people to try to support local bookstores. So find out who the
Yeah.
local bookstores are, but it can be ordered online. Um, And so we encourage people to do that, and people can follow us on social media and share the content. And the content is
Yeah.
always really just there to try to inspire people, to live well. So that's how people can support.
Oh, I love it. Well, cool. All right. So for our followers out there, we'll make sure that we put all of the notes that Thosh had just talked about, the book, a couple places, maybe locally for you all that you can support the movement. But Thosh, would love for you to extend this message to Chelsea as well. I love what you all are doing, man. It's a really beneficial, authentic, empathic way of approaching a person where they are in their wellness journey. So, like I said, man, the tonality and everything of it was really, really beautiful. So I think a lot of our listeners and people beyond that can gain a lot of value from it, man. So thank you for your work, brother.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful, man. Thank you.
Thank you again. I'm honored that it resonates with you. I'm just happy about that. And, you know, I'm glad that you're living this lifestyle too, and that you are putting out what you put out into the world as well. And
Yeah.
so thanks for your work too. Thanks for your inspiration and all
Hey.
that. And thanks for creating a space for this and, having these awesome conversations. I feel like I already know you too. Like,
Yeah,
wait,
bro. Hey, did
yeah,
we just become friends?
we
Let's
did.
go.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's a good conversation. So thanks again. We'll certainly stay connected for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. All right, y'all. Well, I'll catch